In this episode of the show, we're going to be talking about the best plugins for mixing. That's coming up on Home Music Studio One. All right, everyone, welcome back to the show. Dave Maxey here from HomeMusicStudio1.com. And in today's episode, we're going to be dealing with the best plugins for mixing. However, before we can begin to get into to this category that I want to deal with today, I've got to cover just a few ground rules. Number one, I'm not talking about at all plugins for the mastering process, okay? We're actually dealing with what I would call post-production or the post-production phase of building a professional quality mix. In other words, the mixing portion where we're actually making the adjustments to our track, not the final phase of mastering, okay? Secondly, I am in no way, shape, or form attempting to address and talk about every plugin ever known to man, all right? So please do not comment and do not ask me, hey, how come you didn't talk about fill in the blank and list your favorite plugin, all right? My goal is actually not to address every plugin out there because we literally have thousands of plugin options from both free VSTs that are available on into the high quality Waves plugins and all the different options that we have on out there. There's a lot of options, thousands of them. My goal is actually to really separate the best plugins for mixing into categories. And here's why. I think that if you've got at least 1 to 3 plugins within these categories, then you have got everything you need to do. You've got really the best plugins for mixing, okay? And I'm going to show you a few of the options that I use. And the last kind of ground rule is just for sake of time because we're going to really kind of cover a lot of things here. I'm not going to show you exact web pages of where some of these plugins are going to be, but I will make sure to list the link in the description for any of the given plugins that I may mention. So let's go ahead and jump on in. All right, so as we get into dealing with the best plugins for mixing, I want to start by just explaining that with the projects that I build and have now for, close to actually a little bit more than 2 decades, there are really only 6 main categories that most all the plugins I use fall into these categories. Now, I realize that today there's a lot of things that are out there, and so there may be a few rogue plugins that don't necessarily fit neatly into these 6 categories, but as a general rule, these are what they are. Category number 1 are EQs. Number 2 is compressor gates and limiters. Category number 3 are what I call my width or depth manipulation plugins. These are things like reverbs and delays. Category number 4 are what I call the color plugins. These are plugins that you're using just to kind of color the tone. They could be flanges or phasers or distortions, all right? That's in category number 4. Category number 5 is where I group all of my emulation plugins. Now, whether it's an analog tape emulator or an analog console emulator, or I know there's also some emulators out there designed to say emulate, take a Shure 58 and emulate that to make it sound more like a Neumann version, a Neumann microphone model. Okay, so that's the emulation category. And then lastly, I just have a miscellaneous category. In the miscellaneous category is where I group my effects that are designed to maybe add some of that low-end harmonics, like the R-Bass plugin from Waves or anything similar, exciter-style plugins that are designed to kind of add some extra top-end to your mix. I group my noise reduction plugins in here, my pitch correction plugins, as well as anything that is designed to manipulate that stereo width, all right? And there's any number of plugins out there. So those are really kind of my 6 main categories. So the project that you're looking at in front of you right now, this is a large project that I had the opportunity to mix recently. It was super fun. This is in the Reaper DAW. And I know some of you are going to ask me, okay, if you're using Reaper, what theme are you using? This is actually the Imperial theme. Do a little Googling on that on your own. And the reason I want to show you this project is because you can see right here, I've got 110 effects running. Now, to be fair, some of these are multiple instances inserted of EQs and compressors, but we've got 110 total effects. And then this project itself is actually got 75 tracks in it, okay? Now, within those tracks, that includes, you'll see these blue right here. These are my AUX mixes, so anything I'm grouping together. And then I've got a couple effects buses that I'm using, as well as my main buses right here that I break my my categories up into, okay? So a very large project, and because it's so large, it represents almost every one of these categories. And so I'm going to walk through a little bit of and show you, what I've got here in these categories of plugins. Before I do, just for kicks, I'm going to play a little bit of this for you. This was actually something that was done. It was a live track, live recording done for a benefit concert for children, raising money to actually build wells and actually water. I believe it was reservoirs for the children in Makawene, Africa. Okay, so really a little bit completely outside of anything I've ever done, but it was super fun. So really kind of has an African style sound to it. Was super fun. There were a lot of elements in this track. Okay, in this project. So we live tracked 64 tracks using a Dante system and an Allen Heath digital mixer. And I brought my machine in and really kind of pushed it to the limit. It was awesome, fun to do. Actually ended up getting an SSD solid state drive in order to make this happen. Reaper performed perfectly with no glitches in any of the audio whatsoever. And so we've got a full drum kit, we've got full percussion, we've got a full choir, we've got lots of vocal mics that were wireless mics. There's brass in here, there's strings in here. Okay, we've got keyboard and piano and organ. We've got guitars in here, both electric, bass guitar, and acoustic. So there's a lot of different elements that happen throughout this evening. All right, I'm gonna let you hear just for kicks a piece of this because it was super fun, and I think I was able to track this, mix it in Reaper, and then do kind of a pre-master for the DVD for this project. And I think it turned out super well. Let's take a listen.
You are the most high God. You are the most high God. Come on, let's go. You are the most high God. The most high God. You are the most high God. The most high God. The most high God. You are the most high God. The most high God. You are the most high. Lord Jesus, you are the most high God.
Okay, it kind of gives you an idea what we're dealing with. So for me, this was way outside of my norm. Super fun to deal with. But I want you to notice that because we've got all these different elements in here, obviously this was just a little tiny piece of what turned out to be 16 different tracks in this entire project. So super long. But because there were so many different elements, obviously I had to use lots of EQ. Okay, so the first EQ that you really need to have access to is some type of linear phase EQ. Now, really what I'm referring to, sometimes there's what's called parametric EQs that kind of fit in this category as well. It's an EQ that allows you to select at least 7 bands, up to 7 bands, and including in those bands would be a high pass, low pass filter. Those are very important that I use often in a lot of these tracks, and the ability to control the bandwidth of the actual band that you're using, and then exactly where that frequency is being cut or boosted. Okay, very important in the EQ category. What you're seeing here can actually be accessed if you head on over to Reaper.fm. I'll put a link in the description. This EQ right here is a great EQ. It comes with Reaper, the Re-EQ, and it can actually be downloaded as a free VST for the Windows platform, and it can be used in virtually any other DAW out there as well. If you're on a Mac, then you actually need to be using Reaper in order to get access in this. Chances are, though, your DAW, if you're using any kind of modern DAW that's a full DAW, is going to have access to some type of EQ very similar to this, but very important to have access to a linear band EQ in category number 1. And definitely one of the best plugins for mixing, and it's going to be a go-to for almost anything you do, okay? Category number 2 is going to be my compressors, limiters, and gates. Now, this project was tracked as a live tracking. Okay. Now, I did not have the ability to go back through and do overdubs. There were so many people involved in making this happen. We were basically able to capture what we got and mix what we had. But you'll notice I've got lots of different mics happening here. Had to rely on a decent noise gate. So I did a combination of editing the track as well as using noise gates to kind of turn off the mics very smoothly and very transparently when one player wasn't singing compared to another. Okay. We actually had mics that were in front of the drum kit, mics that were in front of the percussion, and of course, choir mics. So it's a very different way to mix a project like this. But I've got some gates, noise gates all over the place. One of my favorite gates is the Re gate that is found again in the Reaper plugins. All right. And this is available as well to be downloaded as a free VST. But you definitely want access to some type of noise gate. And when it comes to noise gating, If you don't have the ability to control the attack and the release and some of the functions that are in this plugin, then you'll tend to get very choppy gate sounds, okay, that aren't very natural at all. But this is why I recommend this plugin here, Regate from Reaper, or something similar to give you the attack and the release as well as the hold values. Also got a pre-open value. This makes for very smooth opening, closing, and tracks, and it definitely helps to kind of clean up those spots that would literally, in a project like this, take weeks to go through and scrub and edit every one of these vocals. Within the same category, I definitely am using my go-to compressor here, and this is the Recomp compressor. Now, there are a lot of good compressors out there. You need to make sure when you're mixing, though, that you are using compression, okay? Absolutely paramount, and you want to have some control in order to use compression as transparently as possible. But compression in this mix is not only inserted on the track, controlling the dynamic range. There's a lot of these tracks here, like in the lead vocal, where I'm doing parallel compression. I'm using the compressor as well. In this case, to do some multi-band. Where let me see if I can find one of these here. It might be on the lead vocal. Yeah, this guy right here. So I'm only compressing from 4K on up because I'm using this compressor as even though this is parallel comp right here, that was just the preset that I started with. This is actually being used as a de-esser. Okay, so this is a form of compressing. I'm just compressing where those S's and those T's are in this particular vocal track. So compression is very key. Another compressor out there that I highly recommend if you don't have access in your DAW is actually the TD. See if I can find it right here. Compressors, limiters. Where did you go? The TDR feedback compressor from Tokyo Dawn Labs. Excellent compressor. Takes a little bit more horsepower to run than the Recomp, but if you don't have a good compressor in your DAW, I highly recommend it. Okay. From there, talking about reverbs and delays. Now, for the most part, when I'm using a reverb and a delay, I'm going to be doing that through an aux send. All right. And so I'm in this project, I'm using just the reverb plugin from Reaper. Okay. Again, and this is actually part of Reaper, but I'm using basically what's called impulse generated files. You can do a little Googling on that. This plugin allows me to insert files that emulate the sound. They're WAV files that are designed to emulate the sound of a given arena or a given space. All right. And so you can see here that I'm definitely using my reverb in there. I also have some delays. So the intro of this particular track that I just played you there, the delay was not at all on the live, tracking at all. So the house engineer did whatever he wanted to do. I was the mix engineer for the recording. So basically, I just got clean recorded track. So I was able to do whatever I wanted to do in the mixing side. And so if I go over here to the lead vocal, let's see if I can find this for you, lead vox. This was one of the few times that I used a width and depth plugin directly on an insert as opposed to using it as an aux auxiliary send. And the reason I did that is because this was the only spot on this project that I used this specific delay. Okay. Redelay is an excellent delay plugin, allows you the ability to configure and control pretty much any type of delay that you would want. So if we solo this out, you'll hear kind of the delay in this track. Let's listen one more time.
You are the most high God. You are the most high God.
Okay, so we got that off there. If I play this again.
You are the most high God.
Okay, so you can hear that ping pong kind of stereo delay in there. I was able to accomplish that with the delay plugin, but you definitely need to have access to at least a decent delay or a reverb. If you have a little bit of a budget, one of my more favorite reverb plugins out there is also the True Verb from Waves. Okay, now I was actually able to pick this up through the holidays. I think it was only $49, but it is also a very go-to reverb style plugin that works excellent. Okay, so if you have a little bit of a budget, you keep your eye on things. Oftentimes, Waves has sales. There's a lot of plugin manufacturers out there that have some great sales during the holidays and Black Friday, those kinds of things. And that's where I picked this guy up as well. So in the rest of my categories, so we talk about emulation plugins, tape style, bass harmonics. There's a lot of different emulation plugins that are available out there. I'm not using a ton in this particular project, but one that is in here, I don't have time to actually find the track that it's on. would be this Ferric TDS plugin, which is kind of a saturation analog style emulator, which works really great for kind of creating a little bit of saturation and warming up some of your projects. In whether it's an individual track, it can also be used on a master mix. I know that I've used that in this project as well. If I find the bass guitar, I have used in the past R Bass from Waves, which is a great plugin, kind of give you some bottom if you're missing a little bit of that low end in the bass guitar. In Reaper, in some of the JS plugins, I'm actually using Bass Manager Booster in order to do that. And what this is doing is it's just kind of giving me some low end harmonics in that 80 hertz range, allow me to just kind of boost the just that spot in the bass guitar in a little different way than just pulling that spot up with an EQ would do. Okay. So that's one there that I do recommend, but there's a lot of different options out there, and that's again, this fits in kind of the miscellaneous category, really the first one in the miscellaneous category. We've got definitely some noise reduction plugins that are available in this particular project. I am using one of the ever famous. Let me see if I can find it here. Where did you go? The Refer right here. And this guy right here is an excellent noise reduction plugin that allows you to just really tailor the background noise and pull out just the background noise without getting any artifacts in there. Highly recommend it. But this is definitely a plugin that I used to clean up some of the in between parts in the track. Now, I had to use it sparingly in this project because it was a live mix, and you approach a live mix a little differently than you would a full studio mix. But nevertheless, highly recommend this guy here. Another thing that I am definitely using in this project is some pitch correction. All right. And in this case, rather than using auto tune, which I don't have access to, Antares auto tune, I'm actually using the Reaper automatic pitch correction plugin. And what this is doing is it's just kind of notching the vocals up, just whether they're sharp or flat, just giving them a few cents of where they need to go in order to kind of correct their pitch. Because when you've got so many vocals together, it's really important to have access to some type of pitch correction. Now, I'm not using this to create kind of that share effect. I'm using it just to help balance the vocals a little bit because when I had 6 different vocals trying to sing harmony, they didn't all exactly hit right on the money, and I didn't have the ability to retrack anyone. And so this really helped go a long ways, just kind of clean that pitch up a little bit. Okay. We've got another plugin here that is in the miscellaneous category. I'm using this to add some width to a track that is a copy of the lead vocal track, and then I'm blending that width back in. All right. Another great free plugin that I often use to do the same thing that fits into this miscellaneous category is the ADT automatic double tracking plugin. Let me see if I can find this here. And we'll click on all plugins. That would be this guy here from Vacuum Sound. All right. This does the same, has the ability to really take a mono signal and fatten it out in a nice wide stereo. And there's a lot of uses for this as well. Highly recommended. But it definitely falls into one of the categories of one of the best plugins for mixing. Okay. So at the end of the day, again, my 6 categories are you need to have some good EQs, at least 1 to 3. You need to have compressor gates and limiters. All right. Now I didn't mention that here, but I've got several different limiters happening. One of the limiters, let's see here, was on my master fader if I can find it here. This is a little bit of a clipper limiter that I'm using because I did a pre-master on this. This track right here was actually used in the DVD. So lots of different options out there. Waves has some great limiter plugins. If you are also using Reaper, another great limiter is in one of the JS plugins, and it's just the JS master limiter. Use this guy quite a bit as well. Excellent plugin. So that is kind of category number 2, the compressor gates and limiters. Category number 3, again, being the width and depth plugins. So we've got your reverbs, delays. Category number 4, flangers, phases, distortions. I didn't have necessarily a ton of that in this project, okay? And just for sake of time, we don't have time to go there, but I do a little bit of some things on the electric guitar as well as the bass guitar where I'm using a little bit of kind of color and some saturation or distortions that I'm using there. So there's a lot. This category is super broad, so I'm not going to address that hugely. And then number 5, we've got kind of our emulations, which I've mentioned in there, and then lastly, things that fall under the miscellaneous categories. So if you can find plugins that fit in these lines, guys, then you're going to be well on your way to having what you need. And my caution is to be careful. because there are so many plugin options out there, you do not need every brand new shiny plugin that's ever out on the market. Okay. Learn to mix with plugins in these categories, 1 to 3 basic plugins in these categories. And as you get really good at that, then begin to kind of branch out if you're finding yourself unable to overcome a specific obstacle that you have with the plugins that you currently work with. Okay, so if you need something to do something specific, then sure, branch out. But start basic and get that down. And as long as you got something in these basic 6 categories, then you've got all the best plugins for mixing that you need in your arsenal. All right. Well, there you have it. That is my category listing of the best plugins for mixing. Hopefully, that was something that was super helpful for you. I'd love to hear back from you. So make sure you leave a comment below. Also, if you've not yet joined the online community and signed up for my free affordable home recording tips newsletter, I want to invite you to do that. You can go ahead and click the link on the screen right here. Or if you're watching mobile, you're watching this video on mobile, just go ahead and click on the eye icon right up here and you can drop your email into the form and click submit. And just as a thank you from me to you for joining the more than 17,000 now newsletter subscribers, I'm going to send a free ebook out to you entitled Understanding Compression in the Home Music Studio. So with that, again, make sure to click this link up here or follow the link in the description. And I'm looking forward to seeing you on the inside. Until next time, this is Dave Maxey with Home Music Studio One.